Hello, everybody. It's Monday no, Tuesday the 26th. We usually have this on Monday, but today is Tuesday since yesterday was a public holiday in the US. And this is the engineering focused weekly group sync for the static site editor group. As usual, I'll start off with some FYIs. The first one is just around the culture M360 feedback process that we're currently undergoing. I would encourage you all to prioritize this and do 1 or 2 a day. I don't know how many you have. I've got 13 to do, so I've got quite a few that I need to get through. But they take a long time to do if you do them properly, and you want to do them properly because you want to give proper feedback. We've got 2 weeks to do them, so there's ample time. If you do 1 or 2 a day, and you do them like first thing in the morning, you'll get through your batch very quickly. I suggest you do them sooner rather than later. I would like to encourage you all to not just focus on giving feedback around what somebody can do better, but specifically what they're doing well. I think giving a team member feedback in terms of what they're doing well is a good indication to them as well of what they should continue to focus on and do good. In the same breath, don't hold back in giving feedback where somebody can be better and where they not living up to our values. I highly encourage you all to watch the training video that Culture provides. They've got a model called the SBI model, which basically goes, like describe the situation, the context, give the behavior that you're referencing, and then what the impact was. So for instance, I can, and Enrique, I'm going to use you as an example because we all know you're a bad apple. So I can say that while working on the GraphQL implementation of the static site editor, Enrique was not inclusive in his behavior, and that made the impact of that was that the rest of the team felt excluded from the decision making and what was going on. So that is an example of, given the situation, what was the person's behavior and what was the impact. So always, if you use that model, it prevents you from being getting personal, but also being vague. Always describe what the impact was. It's very easy to say somebody was not inclusive, but not connecting it to what the impact was makes it very ineffective. So keep that model in mind. And most important, do not forget to do your self-review. It's really important to have this as well, so that you can do a benchmark in terms of how you see yourself and how others see you. If there's a blind spot to be found, you will only really bring it out if you do your self-review honestly as well. So I encourage you all to do a self-review. Even if you've only been at GitLab for 2 months or whatever, it's still worth doing that and getting some baseline established. Right. That said, that's all for 360 feedback. We also have tomorrow we have our team day for the Jamstack virtual conference. I know it conflicts with the Vue security training. And if you really feel like you want to watch that live, I will not hold it against you, but those sessions will be recorded and you can watch them afterwards as well if you prefer. In terms of how tomorrow will work, I'll host a Zoom call and share my screen, which will be a live stream of the event. So we'll have kind of like streaming inception going on. The team members will join my Zoom call and we can chat with each other via Zoom chat or verbally between the sessions on the call. And we can take notes in our shared session notes doc. Then, do you have to join the team Zoom call? No, you can watch it on your own if you prefer to do that. Do you have to be on the Zoom call the whole time? No, you can jump off and on as you want. I'm personally going to jump off at some time during the evening my time, as I will need to help just feed the kids and put them to bed. But I'll leave the session running anyways. You don't even have to join the call if you don't want to, or do the whole Jamstack conf thing. You can carry on with normal workday if you prefer. This is an optional thing. It's not a mandatory thing. So, but it's a good opportunity for us just to have a team there and to bond and to enjoy some time and hopefully learn a few things, that's very relevant to what we're working. All right, that's all for the FYIs. I'm going to move on to the engineering section. As we discussed in our retro, we'll keep communicating key dates for milestones. And so for 13.1, our internal kind of like cutoff date to make the milestone is around the 17th of June. Now, the 17th is a fictional date. There is no real release cutoff date. And as you will see with the link to the handbook that I've linked at the bottom, the cutoff could be as early as the 15th or as late as the 20th. 13.0 was cut off on the 20th. It all depends on the stability of GitLab.com. And so that will determine what the actual date is. I think working on the 17th as a rough kind of like marker in the sand for us is still good because it gives us something to aim at and so on. And therefore, I would suggest that if something is earmarked for the release and it's critical, which none of our issues are, by the way, for 13.1, we should aim to have it in maintainer review by the 15th of June. So with that said, we'll move on to the next item, which is the ready for development status check that I want to do. So last week we had a big focus on doing wrapping up some loose ends and issues, but also starting our planning for the 13.1 issues and making sure that we get into the implementation. And so I want us to just run through all the issues that we have in planning or have earmarked for 13.1 and make sure that they are ready for development. And if not, just briefly discuss what we need to do to move the needle on them. It's important that we get some momentum building this week so that we get into our development stride and make sure that most of what we've planned to release in 13.1 can be achieved. I'm going to give each team member an opportunity to just verbalize their section, and we'll start with Derek.
Sure, thank you. So for the first one, with respect to the front matter, again, I want to say thanks to everybody's feedback. I also got feedback from the maintainers. So right now, the plan is to do the pre-parse approach. So that's something I kind of learned this morning, basically. And then as for the display non-markdown content, I have a spike for that with using a custom HTML renderer. So that's kind of the next step. That's why I haven't confirmed it as a ready for development. I don't know if you want to technically flag that differently or something. Yeah, there we go. That makes sense. So that's that. And then the next one I could get to, but it sounds like from a one-on-one that I had with Jean this morning that he might just end up taking that on, just so I can focus on the non-markdown content one.
Yeah, just on that one, Derek, you implemented the event tracking already for that and so the data is there. It's all about just putting a dashboard together, and I'd rather just take that off your plate so that you can just focus on the development side, and I'll do the dashboard.
Cool.
All right, over to Jacques. Jacques, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the first one, inserting an image using the static site editor, that one's on track currently. The first merge request is already in review, and the next one, the the final one will probably be published tomorrow. Styling the Toast UI contextual menus. I've reviewed the designs from Michael there, and I don't foresee any issues implementing those designs on our front end. Then the tracking, that one's currently on hold. As far as I can tell, the event that gets published on the front end is already contains unique identifiers for the user. So we can confirm that once the dashboard's up and running. And then the final one about migrating the ES5 JavaScript to modern JavaScript in the docs project. I don't foresee any problems there either.
So just to go back to the data tracker one, are you saying that the events that we capture already have an identifier that would allow us to kind of like determine unique users?
Yeah, so basically I had to look at the envelope that gets published together with that event. So Derek has obviously done the work of adding our custom parameters to that event, but there are some default parameters as well, such as the domain user ID, which I believe is the important one for identifying whether it's a unique user. And that's probably the identifier that we'll use to check whether it's a unique commit, a unique user that's currently doing a commit.
Okay, well that makes sense. In that case, I think it makes sense if I take this one over as well, because I'll be doing the dashboard for the data we already have, and I can just well do this one then while we're doing that. So let me swing this one to me. All right. Right, Enrique, over to you.
So all the deliverables are ready to be to start working on. In the case of the data tracking deliverable, I'm gonna work on top of what Derek already did to track the number of commits in the editor. So I think that that is gonna speed up my work, because I just need to follow that example. The second deliverable, the confirmation step, is quite straightforward, and I'm working on it already. And in the case of the error communication in the side editor, after some research, my assumption is that we have very little to do in there, because we are going to be using public GraphQL APIs that are really relying on some business logic that is already implemented in the backend. And we have very little room for improvement if we are not redesigning the entire errors handling strategy in public APIs. So yeah, that's my report.
Just on that, one of the things if I recall, we were wondering about is whether we should rely on always receiving the kind of like error messages from the backend, or whether we should have error messages kind of like defined in the logic on the front end. Is there any view on that related to that issue?
Yes. Now the strategy that the REST API and the GraphQL APIs follow is that they return an error message. They are not returning error codes. So we can display that error message, but in my opinion, they may be too technical for showing that to a user. What I am expecting to do is that if there is if the error that is happening is a client error, we are sending a bad request, we are going to find a way of capturing that in the context of the client, so we can display something that is more useful to the user. And any server-side error, we also have to hide them and just like find a way of capturing that and displaying something that doesn't expose any kind of information that we don't want to expose to the user. So I'm sure that this is something that probably we don't have to work on, like to improve the error strategy within the API.
Yes, I want to add something to that. I was writing a comment just before the meeting, but I didn't manage to finish it in time, so I'll finish it afterwards. But in general, some main points that we basically have two sources of errors. First one, it's like initialization errors. It's like we validate if the file is a markdown file, if the file exists, and something like that. And for these errors right now, we display some generalized error message. So we can improve that, and we can provide like specific error messages for each case. About the API errors, yeah, I agree. We cannot do much about that. It will require us like to redo these service objects that we use, and yeah, that's probably not what we want to do right now.
I can confirm it's definitely not something we want to do right now. So it feels like there's not much to do here apart from just wrapping it up and kind of making sure that everybody in the team understands our approach to dealing with these. It is what it is, and we'll kind of like follow that approach. And at a later stage, you know, like once our maturity level is viable and we might want to make things lovable, we can revisit if we want to bring some improvements on this to the product. All right, Vasily, you've got the last few ones.
Yeah. So I have a couple of GraphQL mutation tasks. So one of them was merged today. Another one is on the last stage of the maintainer review. So I expect it to be merged this week. And the last one is about showing DRI on the pages, on the handbook pages. I split the feature issue into some implementation issues today, and I started working on the first one. So yeah, it's pretty, for me, it's pretty clear what to do, and I feel confident that we will manage to do it for this release.
So in summary, all of our planned 13.1 issues, apart from displaying non-markdown content, we've done the thinking, we're happy with the approach we want to take. And then even with that one, Derek, you've got a clear plan of action of what you want to validate next to just confirm the execution plan there. So it feels like we're in a good place to get our heads down and make some progress on these. So I'm happy with that. Vasily, just a heads up, we might throw some work relating to the release post to you, just in terms of helping stitch together the post from a bunch of YAML files and so on. But Eric will be working on getting some more clarity around the requirements, and once we have that, we might do that.
Sure.
Cool. All right, the last item on my list is just to quickly talk about in our 12.10 retro, we discussed how we had issues with having multiple assignees on an issue, and tracking the different state of front end and back end through the workflow. And the proposal that we discussed, and which we said we were going to try and run with and see how it goes, it was this concept of parent-child issues. I spent quite a bit of time going through that and just kind of like seeing how this fits into our overall process. And I'd like you all to just take some time and go through that and make sure that you understand it and also agree with it. And if you don't, please do raise any concerns. I would like to merge this tomorrow if there's no further feedback. But essentially, it introduces this, and what I'm trying to show with this little diagram here is that it introduces this concept of a feature issue, which will be our parent issue, essentially. And feature issue will then have implementation issues, or like Derek and I are currently discussing in this thread here, is it could have R&D issues as well. But essentially, these become child issues of the parent issue, and we'll move this issue and this issue separately through the workflow. So there might be multiple implementation issues on a feature. It might be assigned to different disciplines. And even an implementation issue can have one or more MRs against it. You can iterate your MRs as you see fit best. But what we will be reporting on in terms of where the progress of the work is at the implementation issue level, and where we will be tracking our overall progress of our against plan for a milestone will be at the feature issue level. We discussed having two boards, one that focuses on the status of where the feature issue is, and one that focuses on the implementation issue level. So I'll be, once I merge this, I'll work on getting those boards in. But yeah, so there's quite a bit of updates here. Please read it, make sure you understand it. If anything's unclear, ask, and then we can iterate on that. We can use it, and we'll discuss it in our retros, how it's going and whether it's helping us or hindering us. All right, that's all for the engineering section. Is there anybody else that wants to mention something before we move on to product?
I wasn't in the list, but I've been doing work as well.
Yeah, chat is a black hole of handbook improvements at the moment.
Like, you can look at the first thing on the list, and the work for the middleman monorepo stuff is, it's not very well defined. So the approach I'm taking is I have one spike MR, and then as I find the stuff, I keep it on that MR. Anything that I can pull out as a separate MR that is a blocker or supporting work, I do separately. So I think there was like 7 MRs that I closed last week in addition to the main one that I'm working through. And I think it's looking really good. The progress is good. It is, I think, close to getting ready to merge, but I still need to understand more about what exactly is and is not possible with the rules and the new rules approach for the GitLab CI. There's some things that I want to do that I'm not sure is possible, and I need to look at it closer and maybe ask some people.
Yeah, just for the rest of the team's benefit, what we've decided to do with the handbook was not to create too strong a pre-plan of how we're going to approach this. Essentially, I'm letting Chad pick the blue pill or the red pill and go down the rabbit hole and discover what the best approach is to meeting our objective. And our objective is defined as implementing the monorepo approach. So separating the source code of the handbook from other projects of the repo, as well as having independent pipelines. And those two objectives will help create clarity around ownership, as well as reduce overhead for us going forward. So Q2 focus on the handbook project itself is all about reducing the overhead that it puts on us as a team, so that we can be more product focused going forward. All right, with that, Eric, over to you.
Thank you. I don't have much, and I'll chat more about this in the meeting later on with product and design focused stuff. But I would love some feedback on the outline I made for the status page / water cooler dog fooding opportunity. You don't need to give the feedback now. It's kind of a long outline. My one main concern is as I was putting it together, I felt like I was falling too heavily on it being more of like a blog structure. And since we don't really have the capability of making new posts or new pages from within the static site editor, I don't know that that's the appropriate way to dog food it. So if we can toss around some ideas. I'll be thinking more about how we can keep things tied to a single page, maybe simplify the outline a little bit, and then we'll try and stand up a project this week. And it can evolve, and eventually it might have a blog when we can create new posts from the static site editor, new pages. My main priority this week is making sure that I catch up on all the threads and the conversations going on the issues related to 13.1, making sure that everything's documented clearly in the issues so that we can move forward. But it sounds like everybody's good to go for the most part. I appreciate all the feedback and back and forth last week. I think we had some really good discussions in the issues. So all the thoughtful comments in there was very much appreciated. And then I'm going to give some 13.2 planning, some early 13.2 issue creation and making sure all those are tied up tightly. I'm starting to feel like 13.2 might be, assuming we this is a big assumption, but assuming we get everything done in 13.1 that we want to, I feel like we are very close to being ready to move things into the handbook. Not every page of the handbook potentially, but maybe a section of the handbook that we know is relatively standard in format or more or less purely markdown with like maybe just a little bit, a couple partials or something like that. If we can identify something like maybe the product section, product subdirectory, and use that as an opportunity to test it out, 13.2 might be a good time to do that. But I'm interested in your thoughts, especially as this milestone goes on and we uncover more around the strategy with editing, or rather identifying and not editing non-markdown content. Be interested to see how this goes. So that's just generally my feeling for a focus for 13.2. There will obviously be other features that will come in support of that and some other work that will get prioritized, but that's kind of where my head is.
That sounds like a good idea to get some early feedback, and I think a good target audience to get feedback from is product managers, because we've already seen Jason giving lots of good feedback to us from his experience, and especially if we can have a integration with a smaller group, yeah, that would be quite useful, because I think as soon as we open it to the whole handbook and the whole company, the floodgates will open and we'll get a lot of feedback, and so which isn't bad necessarily in itself, but just as we are still quite nascent, it would be good to have the feedback drip in initially. And so I think yeah, I support us looking at that and doing it for a subsection of the handbook and dealing with whatever kind of like cases we come up with in that, and before we roll it out to the broader company.
Cool. So yeah, I'll maybe for the 13.2 planning, maybe a spike or something like that, just an issue to collaborate on these edge cases as we uncover them, as we're thinking through 13.1 work. We can kind of throw some ideas in there about what it would look like to integrate with the handbook and what challenges we might come across.
All right, that's all for today, and a reminder of the product and design focus group call that will be happening later today. If you're around, feel free to join. Let's catch up on the call. Have a good day, everybody.